write-ups that were more technical than what people wanted, right? Members of the community, they wanted simply to be able to go through and look at historic properties. So the website itself was a little bit more technical than I think it needed to be, like the terminology and things like that. But the search function, we also modified the search function at least 4 or 5 different times within the first month and a half that it was live, because of how members of the public were searching for buildings versus how the survey team thought people would be searching for buildings. So these are just all things to consider if you choose kind of an online platform for this content. Again, not advocating either way. It was just definitely a learning experience.
But you weren't housing the data, right? You were simply using.
No, we are housing. Yeah, we are housing the data.
The Erie Building Survey.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're not able to manipulate it because it's on a website where you have someone who's maintaining that through ArcGIS.
So the data that's available is pretty static.
Pretty static.
Yeah, I mean the photographs, we had a relationship with the Erie County Tax Assessment website for photographs.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is, would the deliverable be, would the city be able to get the data, to have the data and house the data, so that we would be able to put it on a dashboard on our own website?
It is your data.
Right.
The Erie Building Survey that was done by Preservation Erie in 2014 is our data.
Right.
Our website is connected to tables, right? And unfortunately, I don't know enough to talk about it effectively. But
is it also then fed into PA Share?
Yes,
It will be. So it'll be in both places. PA Share. They need it in a certain format, but theirs is also GIS based.
Yes, and typically they ask those that are doing the survey to enter that data into PA Share, so that will likely end up being part of the proposal. You know, I view this from a very pragmatic sort of way. Feedback.
Sorry, I don't know why that's doing.
Like I'll keep talking like that.
I know, but I can't hear you.
I know I'm very soft spoken too.
Get back further away from it?
No, actually, when you get
Like-
that, now it's done. Now
Okay,
you don't
I
hear.
won't move for the rest of the meeting. I look at this from a very pragmatic perspective, that if we're sending surveyors out into the community to be able to have access to kind of all data, that at the end of this, what would be most useful is something that kind of boils down their observations into recommendations. So if there are any new historic districts or potentially historic sites that are eligible, then the most useful thing to be as a kind of final deliverable would be those recommendations, so that those kind of specific historic resources that perhaps rise to the importance of being listed either locally or in the National Register are brought to the forefront. And that way, after the survey is complete, we're able to kind of go into another phase, lots of phases, right? Or next stage, which would be working with those community groups, working with individuals to make sure that things are listed either with the city or on the National Register.
And I would say that we would be, I guess you would call it metadata, that the city would be able to have all metadata related to the survey, so that we ourselves would be the one, because we have GIS, we have a GIS administrator, we can put it on our websites, we can create dashboards, we can do whatever we want with it. We can portray it the way we would like. So yes, I agree with you about the recommendations, but also to have the metadata so that we get it all.
In our RFP, could we request that they
Yes.
Yeah.
work on having it be a user-friendly for the average person?
As
Access.
long as it's in a format that's acceptable to the city's GIS
Okay.
staff, they'll be able to utilize it after that. And I think that's probably the best. And it's going to be GIS parcel based.
Yeah.
And we'll be
they've
able
done
to
this
access.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the data ultimately searchable, like, if somebody wanted to just search commercial properties, or they wanted to search like residential,
Yeah.
two person, you know, like a flat or versus a single family? Can you, or a certain age? So is all those
Yes.
categories are individually searchable?
Yeah, so I guess at this point, I'm not sure, do we ask, see, I don't know that we would, do we ask the consultant to build that system for us, or do we make sure that the survey
Fits.
is complete,
Uh-huh.
and that the city can then
So you have to input
build,
31,000.
yeah, but, well, they're not gonna input it, it'll be in a system that can be read by the city. And then the city can then determine how best we can create a platform.
Display
We just need to make
Yeah.
it compatible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not asking in this.
Well, I'm
RF
just-
No, I'm
Yeah.
asking
I'm
generally,
thinking that
we're
if we
not,
have them
What they
spend
are,
time doing
need,
that,
what you need.
then they're not out there doing the survey.
right.
Right?
And, yeah, so ours was probably an anomaly because they specifically wanted to build
Wanted
that.
to build,
They
yeah.
wanted to use us as a guinea pig.
As a
but
guinea pig.
To Matthew's point about the final report
Yeah.
at the end of the survey, Preservation Erie used it to guide our next steps, right? We had multiple municipalities use that final report to guide their next steps with, again, identifying whether the next step is pursuing National Register nomination, or if it's located in the city now, local designation, but
I think you can have
but
both
there
of
there were
those
only a
things.
handful, there were only a handful of users for the final report. What people wanted to see, so to go to what Mark was mentioning, people wanted to see, I want to see Italianate style houses, and they would, you know, so we ended up allowing a search by style because it was something that we learned over time, just that the public searches things, they want access to this information in a certain way, or they want access to,
And they wanted it for a different reason.
for different reasons,
Yeah.
yes, than what your city staff, city leadership,
Like a profession.
your development-related organizations are going to be
Decision
using it,
makers,
yeah, yeah.
But I think that will come out of the survey, right? Also, and the engagement.
That's a great, yeah.
Our
Yeah.
styles,
That will
I mean, I
come out
would
of the
think styles
engagement.
would be a natural part of the description
you-
of a property, right?
And utilizing the public engagement exercises to get from the community kind of how residents would like to have this information, or what information they would like to have available to them if it can be made available. Yeah, I think that's a great use of the public engagement processes.
Okay, great.
So is this something that we want to have as part of our RFP?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, good comments. Then, I don't think we necessarily need appendix to go over, but if there's any thoughts on that. But let's go to selection criteria, what you're looking for. These are sort of the basic components of what you're looking for in the consultant. I've listed 4 qualifications and experience in creating resource surveys, the detailed proposal of services and specific costs for each phase, ability of consultant to meet the projected timeline, and ability to understand existing conditions, context, communication strategies. Anything glaringly missing from what you would expect from a consultant that we want to make sure that essentially this is what we would use as our scoring mechanism for reviewing the RFPs.
For ability to meet schedule, are they just going to say yes or no, or we're expecting them to put a number of days in there?
Are you asking, is that a question?
Yeah,
me?
for the completion schedule, it's a yes or no, right?
Well, that would be, this is essentially our criteria, yeah. So we would say, yes, they seem to have, and that could be through references,
Okay.
too.
Well, other than us wanting to have more local districts, what other goal for the public would we want it to accomplish?
I would
Do we
wanna
just
see-
want it for us, or do we want to address some of Linda's thoughts about, how the public uses this information?
I guess I looked at that as, in their proposal, if we had examples of how they've engaged the community and if we could score based on whether or not we felt that their past historic examples are something that we would look, that would meet our goals. That's what I had thought of in number 4.
I think we would get a lot more public support if our goal was to produce a product that they could use,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a product that is really designed for public planning, top down.
Yeah, I think so too.
And if you want public buy-in, you kind of have to give the public what the public will utilize. And hopefully they're paying for it.
If I could go back to section 7 for just one moment. If I could add that there are some,
Selection criteria?
yes,
Oh, okay.
there's some language that we used in our current RFP that that we're kind of trying to standardize for the city. If we could put some of the, and I can provide that to you
I-
afterwards.
I may have cut it out of here just for the, I cut a lot. I took basically your RFP for the
SS.
preservation plan.
Oh, this is, okay. I didn't,
And then I took the boilerplate out.
this is more recent. These
Oh,
are more
okay.
recent RFPs that are just in the last couple months that we have some kind of language about interviewing process. I also would recommend that we put a matrix, a scoring matrix. I know that on the flip side, when you have consultants that say, well, why didn't we get this job? Or you then have kind of the backing for that and a scoring system. So maybe we could just add, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but something where it's, on a 20-point scale or 100-point scale, however we want to do it, so that we can say, well, you weren't chosen because you didn't maybe meet this criteria as much as the other one.
Right.
So those are just some suggestions that I have, and I can provide Kathy some of that language that we used in some of the more recent RFPs that we've been
Okay, yeah, that
we've
would be
been
great.
doing. So I can give that to you afterwards.
Okay.
That helps with feedback.
Also, in hearing what everyone has said here, I wonder if there's a next step to this, that after kind of the surveys are done, after the data is brought back to us, that we have an opportunity then to pursue funding for another project that would be more centered on public engagement and public accessibility of the data itself. I'm a little concerned about kind of shoehorning too many different things into one proposal, but I think that what Commissioner Tannenbaum and Commissioner Meyer said is absolutely on point, that ultimately the information needs to be publicly accessible in a way that's usable and I think engaging. And that very well might be part of the kind of community engagement process when we're talking to different people in different communities. But it might not necessarily be part of this RFP, just the next step in a kind of larger plan.
Okay. That's helpful. Okay, that was helpful. I did highlight appendix if there's any other resources that you think we need to direct them to. Any final comments? I thought this was fairly specific. I don't have the link, of course, for the preservation plan yet, but I'll add that. Okay. And I'll go back and I will make these revisions and provide the final, and then I'm also waiting for SHPO's comments as well before I finalize the RFP draft, and then I'll send it to staff, Jackie and you. And then the timeline will of course be extended. We'll let you know, unless you want to see it again before it goes out, becomes public. But if you're comfortable with us
Are we
taking this back.
are we gonna see it before it gets sent out?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, wouldn't y'all want to see the RFP?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Would you want feedback or just
Yeah. We won't go as deep as we did today, but if there's anything that's missing that we have talked about, that would be helpful. I don't want to delay it too much, but certainly appreciate your
No, I
input.
think you sent out and say, if you can get back to us in a day or two,
Yeah.
or we're good.
Okay. I'll have that done for you.
Okay, is that it for the RFP then?
That's it.
Any final comments, questions? We're good? Everybody's on their head? Do we want to talk about the locally designated landmarks? I think that was the last item on our new business.
Yeah, sorry, it should be a certificate of appropriateness for locally
Oh,
designated
see.
landmarks. I said a COE.
I was trying to figure out what the E was the
I
whole
am.
time. That's why I just
Me
said
throwing
locally.
you. That was a typo. I should have just spelled it out. I apologize. It was a last minute add. Now that we have one locally designated landmark and maybe a second one coming up soon, hopefully. The zoning ordinance does then now require certificate of appropriateness reviews for major improvements made to those one now, or hopefully two landmarks, and as you move forward. So what that would require is an application is made when something is done to the building, the exterior of those buildings, whether a permit is required by the city or not, if it falls within the category of major improvement as defined by the city and the HRC, they would have to apply for a certificate of appropriateness, come to the HRC for review and approval prior to proceeding on to making any of those changes or improvements to their building. I know. I added this onto the agenda because we do have at least one landmark, and I know Melinda and Dave have sort of asked about what's going to be the process now and how do we move forward. And I guess wanted to include this item for discussion of what the HRC feels, and of course those who have worked within local designated areas or communities that have that. What is your expectation of major improvements that would trigger a certificate of appropriateness? Not going to do it.
You mean from the owner that wants to make a change?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you want to
We
say?
had a listing of those. Were the general categories that were mainly things that would need to come? I'll refresh my memory on those.
Yeah.
Like some of it could be reviewed by the administrator and not have to come to the committee.
We had talked about that. And I don't know what those are, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to dig those up. But what are it would be a good idea, and then I will have answers for you by the next meeting, what your expectations are. Matthew has something to say. See, I'm sitting right across from him, Dave, so I see his face.
It's very unfortunate for you. It's been my experience that if something is either replaced or repaired in kind, that it's usually done over the counter. It doesn't necessarily rise to coming before the commission. So something though is kind of new construction, demolition, kind of any kind of substantial project, especially one that is highly visible from a way, then you need to come before the commission. And generally speaking, it's also been my experience that work that is done kind of after the fact. So if somebody has completed a project and not seek approval, sought approval, there it is, that they would also need to come before the commission as well.
Okay. Any other thoughts? That sounds like a very measured approach to the work. Is there anything after the fact, anything that's...
I guess
that's
what
in kind?
constitutes a major change?
Well, that's what Matthew has just spelled out, is he suggested that anything that's an in-kind replacement, So, windows replaced with like windows, that's just administrative review, does
Right.
not require a certificate
So
of
it would be
appropriateness.
actual
But a major-
altering
An
or adding.
alteration,
Okay.
or anything that would have required, or let's say it's an in-kind, but they didn't get a permit like they should have. Does that automatically in your mind trigger a C of A? Yeah, it would. Okay. So anything that's just, anything's after the fact. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, we would put some type of detail in there so that someone looking at it would be able to kind of judge whether they need to get in contact with or not. Just some type of general guidance. We can't cover every situation, but generally just here's some examples of items you would need to get approved from. Here's some items that you won't. Yeah,
That makes
not to make
sense.
an exhaustive list, but just some examples.
Will do. What I'll do is, at the next meeting, is, one, we'll need an application. The application should have a basic policy attached to it that mirrors what's in the ordinance, and there may be some modifications to the ordinance that helps clarify that. But I'll get that prepared and have a better report for you at the next meeting, but just wanted to bring it up since it was sort of a discussion, or an earlier discussion prior to finalizing the agenda. But that, Matthew, that was very helpful, thank you.
And a certificate of appropriate, like
And-
we
and
don't
right
have a
now we
certificate
what,
either.
two houses that have gotten that status?
Yeah, well, one, maybe
Yeah.
two.
Okay. Okay.
The certificate, I would think is just a signed application, or do they actually give you something that you post on the wall? Post on your,
Yes.
yes, they do give you a certificate, okay. Okay, that's all I had.
That's it? Okay, well, that's the last on the agenda. Is there anything else anyone has for discussion?
If Mr. Chairperson wouldn't mind, since we're talking about all things great and small, it seems today, one of the thoughts that came up during the conversation around planning and public engagement is the benefit of listing something. And I wondered if the city of Erie had given any consideration to plaques for historic landmarks, whether or not that program would be kind of managed by the city itself, or if there's a template at someone who makes plaques that someone might be able to go to that perhaps has our blessing to move forward with. I wonder if we're looking at kind of small certificate of appropriatenesses to put in people's windows, if we might also look to have something physical that celebrates the process of being landmarked that people might avail themselves of in the future as well.
I don't think we've talked about it before unless I missed it, but that sounds like a great idea.
TACA has a big
Yeah.
bronze plaque since we're on the National Historic Register. I mean, it's handsome.
Do you have room for another plaque?
I'm sorry?
Is there room for another plaque?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll look that up. It was pricey. I mean, it was, this big. Actually, that's not so big. It was $500.
And you have the honor of paying for it, did you not?
I did. I'm so happy.
And that's
Well, how
typically-
much was it?
I think it was about $500.
Okay.
It was heavy, and then they shipped it to us. We did it out of town. I have to see, I don't remember, we looked around at the time, found the company that did it. Tom, Tom Hagen would know, where he gets those.
Yeah, Lakeshore.
And,
Lakeshore Markers.
I think he does the local monument guy.
Well, we could,
He does.
we could ask,
at Lakeshore
ask
Market.
your insurance
Yeah,
if we
yeah,
can
Lakeshore,
borrow
Lakeshore.
the plaque maker, the plaque press.
I talked to his architect at the time, and like they use Lakeshore to make the bronze. We could get a generic quote on if it's this size with more or less these many words on it, what would it cost?
Perhaps for a design perspective, something that identifies it as being a city of Erie.
Yeah,
Historic
that'd be
landmark,
great.
a city seal or something on it.
Sure.
But that's what, Commissioner, you're describing. I mean, that's not atypical in the least. And that's a double negative. But having either, externally the person's responsible for either working with the vendor directly or occasionally working with a nonprofit that works with a vendor or something of that, where there is a kind of an official channel that someone can pursue.
Because even the national didn't send us a plaque.
But the national, you're required, are you
No, they're not
required
required
to
to
have
put
a
a plaque up.
bronze
Nope.
plaque?
No, but neither did they offer us one.
Right.
They didn't send us one automatically when we became, on the register.
But
We had
that's-
we had to seek it out and we had to pay for it.
There were no standards around what it looked like, what it should say? I mean, because I've seen those all over the country,
It's
It's
so.
like there should be standards.
We called the
City
company and they said, oh yeah, we
the
need to
HRC
go time, and I
standards.
said, let's not make it garish, let's do something nice, and it was.
Yeah, on the National Park Service's website, they do have kind of recommendations.
Guidelines.
Yes, and for something that has an official seal on it, especially, I would think that the city would want to give their kind of review and
Yeah.
blessing
Yeah.
to a process.
But if you had, the Wayne Blockhouse or
Mhm.
something actually historic, from Erie County, that might be the most recognized historic, other than the Land Lighthouse. There's only a couple of
Did they-
dramatically, historically recognized iconic pieces in Erie County. That would be really, you would have that on there, it'd be wonderful.
I know we're short of staff, but it seems like speaking to a vendor and perhaps getting a proposed design might be a good initial step we could put for ourselves for the next meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sounds really, really like a good thing to do, so. Okay, any other comments, questions? We'll adjourn. Would anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think the ayes have it. Thank you.